Welcome to Matters Financial and Geopolitical from the Frontier. I trust it goes well. Mindspeak returns this Friday, 22nd of January, from 5 p.m. at the Intercontinental. We'll be hosting Albert Mugo and three other folks from his executive team. He is the MD and CEO of Kengen, and I'm looking forward to it enormously. There's a tremendous story here that's to be told, and in fact what I learned yesterday, we did a little teaser, have a look at it, it's on the website, is that we actually have a surplus of energy now compared to peak consumption, which is really quite a remarkable outcome. What is Mindspeak is a little clip we put together, and there are links on the website and on Rich Wrap-Ups if you want to go back in time and have a look at previous sessions. Macro thoughts, and we're getting a little bit of a trading bounce happening today. It started off last night, but as Russ Costa-Rich, the global's chief investment strategist for BlackRock, has said, it comes down to one basic fear, which is the global economy. The market is manic depressive, Howard Marks, co-founder of Oaktree Capital Group. It swings from seeing only the positives to seeing only the negatives, and from interpreting everything positively to interpreting everything negatively. I wrote about this over the weekend in my piece, A Start to the Year That Goes Back Decades. Holger global market cap has plunged to the lowest since 2013. Home thoughts, I drop Hannah and Layla to the Muthaiga mini market. It's a pickup point for these various school buses. And then occasionally I find Hannah, I cross her path as I'm buying my coffee and her school bus is headed over the highway. And she was sitting in the back and concentrating really hard. And the moment was quite fleeting. She didn't see me. And it took my breath away a little. She's really grown up. Time moves so fast, doesn't it? Ukraine, Euromaiden's godmother engages Kremlin Grey Cardinal. What passes for Kremlinology at times hits intriguing boundaries due to sheer paucity of information. This happened on Friday when a key Kremlin functionary and presidential aide, Vladislav Surkov, Adam Curtis has spoken about him a lot, he's a very interesting fellow, and the United States Assistant Secretary of State for Eurasia, Victoria Nuland, met up in the remote northwestern Russian enclave of Kaliningrad, seeking and clocked several hours of secret conversation. Nuland flew in from Lithuania and left Russian soil immediately after the conversation. There is a surreal touch to it. Moscow sees Nuland as the godmother of the Euromaiden in Kiev in February 2014. And there are pictures of her braving the snow and ice on the city square in the thick of winter, distributing sandwiches to protesters seeking the ouster of former President Viktor Yanukovych. Surkov, of course, is often depicted in the West as the Grey Cardinal in Kremlin politics, stands blacklisted for visa under the US sanctions because of his role in the Ukraine conflict. There are two versions of Surkov. He was a charioteer of the Novorossiysk project to annex eastern Ukraine, and two, he is actually a Westernist at heart. He is a key figure in Putin's court, and Victoria Nuland is a key architect of the Ukrainian situation. I concluded by saying two principles emerge from the shadows momentarily. Oscars 2016, Spike Lee boycotts the ceremony over lack of diversity. I just like the photograph of him in The Independent. China Q4 GDP slows to 6.8%. However, Brad Plumer tweets, and this is a point I've previously been making, China's electricity consumption grew just 0.5% in 2015. So what are the odds that GDP really grew 6.9% as reported? ECB's Rimsevich says Europe is too relaxed about China's slowdown. Currency markets, a bit of a pop early this morning. Euro is now at 108.87. Dollar index around the 99 level. Japanese yen 117.78. Swiss franc earlier today 10078. The pound, which was at 142.69, is playing around with the 143 level. Aussie last trading at 0.6903. India rupee 67.575. South Korean won 1205.96. Rial 405.76, Egyptian pound 783.29, and the rand I think is a little bit firmer than 673.28, which is where it was earlier. I'll put up a one-year chart of the dollar index, and interestingly, Bernanke, I saw a tweet before Twitter went down, calling a top in the dollar, saying he thinks the dollar rally has run out of steam now. I'll put up a one-year chart of sterling. We're at the 143 level, but I think we're headed down to the 136 area, in point of fact. Commodity markets, gold at 1092.45. I'll put up a one-year chart. Obviously, it's been a very uncertain start to the year, going back to the Great Depression. Gold caught a bid in all of that. Crude oil, also on the bounce this morning. I'll put up a one-year chart, and some are looking for a trading bounce. We've fallen very, very dramatically, very, very quickly. Let's move on to sub-Saharan Africa. Barclays is preparing to stage a gradual retreat in sub-Saharan Africa. This has been a report that's been carried by various people lately. The bank is drawing up plans to sell some of its 62% stake in the Barclays Africa Group. People familiar with the matter have said. Barclays executives have concluded that being the majority owner of a sprawling African business no longer fits with the bank's strategy, according to people familiar with the matter. That's going to be a big deal. The nation's so-called sovereign spread has widened 95 basis points this year to reach 507 points on Friday, more than the 503 average of emerging market peers. This is South Africa. The South African all shares down 7.53% so far this year. Dollar rand, as I said, last trading when I checked at 16.7738. I think it could go some ways over 20 on another curveball from President Zuma. South African food makers seen unable to handle drought and the rand. Food inflation will probably exceed 10% by the middle of this year. It was 4.8% in November. This is Statistics South Africa. Food prices are expected to increase by as much as 25% in the year ending April 2017. Egyptian EGX30 has been hammered 15.2% lower so far this year. Nigerian stocks fell another 4.1% to a 3.5-year low. Yesterday, the Nigerian all shares down 21.27% now, and just in 2016 it's been a rout. And I think part of the problem is what I wrote about on the 18th of Jan when I said the Nigerian Naira, whose official rate is just under 200, would now be closer to 350 if it were a freely convertible currency. And then talking about, in the 11th of Jan, I was talking about winners and losers in Africa. And I said there are clearly winners and losers, the big elephants in the room, Nigeria and South Africa, which together make up considerably more than 50% of sub-Saharan African GDP, are getting mauled. Madame Lagarde was in Lagos and trying her elegant level best to cajole President Buhari into devaluing the Naira, and at a time of his choosing rather than in a disorderly manner, And at a time of the markets choosing, that risk remains. That's why the equity market is so weak. Ghana Stock Exchange Composite Index is up 0.06% this year, bucking the trend. Mozambique, Africa Confidential, is reporting fighting is flaring in Tete. Mozambican villagers at a refugee camp at Kapisa, Malawi, say they have fled government security forces who burnt crops and homes in Tete. Sources at the camp have told Africa Confidential guerrillas from the opposition, Renamo, and government troops have clashed in the Tete area in an undeclared war that the Maputo government seems anxious to keep quiet. Tete was the scene of heavy fighting in the Frelimo-Renamo war. Not a good sign. Let me put up a photograph of Pemba Island taken from the sky as we landed there on the way back from Maputo a while back. Analysts expect a steady lending rate as CBK team meets. The Central Bank of Kenya Advisory Committee meets on Wednesday, even as analysts on Monday projected that they expect the MPC to vote to leave the benchmark lending rate unchanged. In a pre-MPC outlook, several analysts interviewed by the Daily Nation forecast the rate to remain steady as the shilling hints of resilience, with the country's foreign reserves rising gradually and steadily and interbank rates showing stability. On Monday, the shilling held steady at 102.3. This is nearly at a 5-month high. I said, I would like to think the MPC will stand aside this time round. The central bank acted preemptively last November, and Governor Dr. Patrick Njoroge was ahead of the curve. The shilling is just shy of a 5-month high, confounding the naysayers, and is behaving with some resilience. Inflation has surely peaked now, and therefore I expect the central banker to bank some of his bona fides and leave rates unchanged, I said. The Kenya shilling, as I said, 102.30, very, very stable. Transcentury has moved to assure investors that it is on course to repay 8.1 billion shillings owed to bondholders, despite the sudden resignation of its CEO, Gaucho Kuna. Dr. Kuna left the investment firm last Thursday, followed by Joe Carago, a non-executive director who resigned the next day. Share price data is there if you're interested in having a look at it, but clearly lots of complexities now and very difficult scenario to envisage how they're going to get their way out of it. Nairobi All Share outperforming most sub-Saharan African indices. It's down 3.16% year to date. NSE 20 down 5.35% year to date. It's interesting how East Africa is outperforming its peers across sub-Saharan Africa, and I think that outperformance is set to continue.